Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast about music, education, and technology. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Is this the show? Are we rolling? Are we doing it?
I mean, I'm recording.
Okay.
I've got myself recording. Is that enough?
Perfect.
Just
it's
as a backup.
Great for me. I'm thrilled you both want to do this. Top of the summer break here. Or I guess
I'm still
David, you've been
teaching.
on
I don't know
right?
what your deal is.
Yeah, you've got summer class, right? So is it really?
Yeah, I've been out for close to a month. But it's interesting. You said you went to a conference. I just went to a electronic digital instrument conference at Berklee.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
So we can talk all the new developments we've seen. That's two different sides of that coin.
Cool.
Well, maybe we should just do conference chat. Then you both talk about it. And maybe Will, you can sneak some Push 3 news.
Yeah, there's a lot of Push 3 news. Yeah, I mean, I got to try one out. I tried to order one through the the certified trainer group has like a different form we fill out, but I thought I did it right as soon as I got the email, but I guess the Midwest is delayed by 3 weeks, so anybody in that zone, we're behind a little bit. So maybe later this summer I'll get my own.
It's its own little metaphor for the Midwest.
I guess so. Yeah, the people at Berklee were like, yeah, they just drove one up here, but it's the Midwest. We have to wait till the drop shipping catches up.
I say that as a person who grew up in Missouri, went to school in Michigan, and lives in Kansas. So.
There you go. Yeah. I'm pretty sure we're all in the same boat on the new stuff. I think Robby's totally frozen. Yeah, I'll just keep going.
He's got a look on his face like he's about to jump in.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about the Push 3.
The Push 3 is, it's one of those what's a computer kind of moments, right? Like, we had like our own introduction to it that we saw some demos that, maybe we're a little more realistic than some of the ones that are on the website, and it's an oh no. Robby's gone. Maybe
we should wait then.
Okay, we'll wait. We don't want to waste this talk. It's heavy. Don't let me forget to talk about how heavy it is.
In a good way? Like sometimes I feel like some of those things
massive.
are like cheap plastic things that get knocked off of stuff really easily.
I guess in the way of like, it passes the heavy test. Like I just paid for something expensive, but
right. But like I don't know. I had an original Novation Launchpad, and that thing like you could.
That wasn't heavy
frisbee.
enough.
No, yeah.
The original. I should save all this, but we'll just do it again. The original Push. I remember Gerhard's demo was like he pulled it out of a backpack. It was like the original Macintosh kind of like. Look
like
at how
like
you can
the
carry
MacBook
this
Air
around.
Pulling it out of the.
It was like that. Look, we fit all this stuff into and this. There he is.
Hey,
we're talking about how heavy the Push 3 is.
Nice. Just keep going.
We'll go back. We'll go back and pick it up if you want.
Yeah. So anyway, it's not like it's a bad device. It's just like the portability aspect of it is played less and less each generation, I think, and. Which is interesting because the people demoing it like have all these use cases, but most of them involve setting it on a table. I mean, there was the guy at Berklee that, Dan Freeman has that guitar that he made out of a Push 2 that's really fun to watch him play. But no, it's heavier. It's got a massive heat sink on the back that just protrudes. It's like the feet are thicker, so the feet like keep that from touching the table, but it's interesting. I don't know if the non-standalone one has the big heat sink. I only got to play with the standalone one. But I think to the average person, the biggest difference they'd notice is the pads. The pads are quite a bit, they're different. Like the lights are more centered, so that's not just a trick of the photography. Like it is less diffuse than the second Push. The second Push had very even lighting. This has like a spotlight in the middle of each pad almost. and the pad height is a lot shorter, and the stuff that it's made out of is harder. So they're, every generation of the Push, those pads get a little harder. That must be a hard manufacturing thing to do, but like they're slicker. So all that MPE stuff that they added feels like it's okay to slide. It's interesting. They're a lot more sensitive, and I guess the way that they pulled that off is it has like 3 layers of touch sensitivity that it's mapping, and
like
it's a lot more high tech.
Sensitive, you mean?
Velocity sensitive is like the bottom layer. I think that's similar to what it was using before, but now it has position sensors.
Oh wow! Like
so
within
it's like a 2-dimensional grid of like layers of where you're touching on the actual pad. So like one of the demos was like, I have this drum kit that has like variations of every sound on every pad. So like my snare drum has like the rim click and a roll and stuff, like different articulations inside of the one pad, and it knows where your finger is. So there's all these new settings about like when you initially touch, consider that the center, and then when I go this way, that's the bending and this is the modulation. Like it's really it's definitely a more advanced piece of like hardware than the original Push design, which has been replicated a few times. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about the Push 2 is that I feel like almost everything I know how to do in Ableton I can do with this like instrument sitting on my desk. That's why it's kind of interesting that like you can do the standalone thing now, is because if you get really accustomed to like if Ableton is like your primary workstation, you get really accustomed to kind of playing the software, so to speak. And then I guess it's kind of cool to be able to like then still feel like you're interacting with that same software, even if the like screen is not in front of you. I mean, is that kind of like the way you feel like most people will use it in standalone, or do you feel like they're trying to go into this territory of more like the OP1 with like hobbyist, or like you're on an airplane even in your professional and you want to just get some ideas out? Like, I don't know, who is that feature for, do you think?
It's not for going on an airplane. That's not. It's too big. It's too big. But no, I immediately thought about the OP1, especially regarding the price, because you've got this gadget that has an audio interface, and it has its own synth engines, and it has its own recording method, and just the difference is one is like way fleshed out and the other one's like stripped to the bone, basically. It was the conference I was at was interesting. There were a lot of playback engineers there, people that run backing tracks for live shows, and they like one of their big things is redundancy and making it so they have multiple computers running the same live set and they keep them in sync with each other. They were like hot and cold about it at the same time, because the standalone live feature is of no use to them. Like they need redundancy across multiple copies of live. They need file backups and stuff like that. But at the same time, the new Push has MIDI out, which theoretically could be fed into one of those redundancy mixers. And that's how they keep their projects in sync, is not through some Ableton Link magic or Max Patch. It's like once they have their playback set, they only use MIDI commands to go through it. And that's how they keep the sets in sync. They're getting the same exact MIDI data. So that is interesting to them, and not enough of them have tried it out to know if that's of use. Certainly the people who get on stage and use the Push as an instrument are very excited about it. Those people are like, finally, this eliminates one thing that I have to deal with on stage, and it makes it so like I can totally get rid of that element. But it's new and not a lot of people have tried it, so there's no reports on stability or anything like that yet. No reports on, running custom max patches, which it can do, which is wild. So, there's a lot of things it can do that are pretty insane. There was somebody who tried loading the demo set that has all the live suite features and an arrangement that's kind of baked in and the arrangement worked even though there's no arrangement view. So like live is there, it's all there. Minus you can't get to that view.
Right.
But yeah, the whole software is there.
Are you going to put these in your classroom?
Not anytime soon. I mean, they cost quite a bit, and they're not giving them away like they were before. These are a significant engineering project for them, I think.
I mean, it seems like there's a pretty substantial bit of computer inside of there. It's not just the fancy control surface.
It's one of those Intel NUCs that's inside of it, but if you look into it, it's been separated from its I/O board, so it's like just the compute unit, and you plug this module in. That it's like all of the computer stuff got separated. It's almost like backwards from like a PC where you add on PCI cards or whatever to get the different I/O. It's like the I/O is set, and you can have the computer or not. It's really strange. Backwards thing, but yeah, that's definitely like the extra 1,000 is from all of that computer stuff and the battery and
I mean, like the spec sheet looks like they're talking about a PC, right? Like
it is a PC. Yeah,
I know, right? But like that, and that's why it costs so much, right? This has an Intel Core i3 processor and 8 gigs of RAM or whatever, which seems like not enough for pretty serious Ableton work. But I guess if that's only doing Ableton stuff, then they can make that work.
Yeah, I imagine that's about, if you have an operating system that's only running one app, you can get away with lower specs and have the same kind of performance you normally enjoy. So it's not trying to run Zoom in the background or anything like that. I was a little surprised there wasn't like a one lower version, because the new, like the not standalone one is a little more expensive than the old one by about $200, which is about the cost of the added audio and MIDI interface that they put in it. I was a little surprised they didn't either keep selling the Push 2 or just have a version that doesn't have those holes in the back and keep the MIDI control only one. But I mean, that hardware is hard. I have no idea, what they're up against factory wise.
So maybe it was when I froze a second ago. What's the name of the conference where you?
It was. What is it called? It was called Connect, Berklee Connect, EDI Summit.
Pretty well attended.
Yeah, I mean it's there were maybe like 50 of us there, and the sessions were all good. It was like every session was like something I wanted to go to. There were some other educators. There was a whole team from Sweden that has a pretty cool electronic music program. And a high school level, there was a lot of, they had the playback engineer from Cirque du Soleil there. And, that was really interesting to watch how he works. And it was cool. It was one of the better conferences I've been to.
I was just going to say, my university only recently got like 4 or 5 Mac Minis for our music department. So maybe we'll get a Push 3 in 2045 or something.
Just in time.
You did. So I'm curious, David, to hear about, so I started listening to the most recent episode of Scoring Notes podcast, where it's like it's like a live recording of your panel where you interviewed a handful of people who are using like different iPad score readers.
Yeah.
Like in there, I think, and I haven't finished. I only just listened to the first couple minutes. It sounds like all of them are like industry professionals, like managing libraries for orchestras, and all have sort of like different takes and spins on like why the different iPad primary kind of score reading apps work in their situations. Is that a fair introduction of podcast episode?
Yeah. So this was at the beginning of June. I was in Berlin at the MOLA conference. MOLA is it used to stand for the Major Orchestra Librarians Association, but they decided that the word major was a little bit pretentious, and they wanted to include people who are not just orchestra librarians, but also opera librarians or band librarians or chamber librarians or whatever. And these are performance librarians, so not like research librarians that you might have at a university library, but people who are responsible for getting music on stands in front of players on a regular basis. And for big orchestras that do a lot of shows, especially pops shows where there's a lot of short pieces and there's a lot of like flexible instrumentation and stuff, they have a big job and they have a lot to do. And big orchestras might have anywhere between 3 to 6 or 8 librarians, which that 8's too many, but maybe in like some state-funded European orchestras or something, they might have 8, or in a military band situation where they're covering a lot of different ensembles. Most like smallish regional orchestras in the U.S. will have 1, and like a big orchestra might have 3 or 4. So anyway, they have been getting more and more open to the idea of players using iPads or other score reading technology on stage. This is a group of people who are not traditionally prepared to embrace new technology for all sorts of completely valid reasons. And so MOLA this year had its first ever tech fair as the first day of its conference. The first day was all technology stuff. And you might be surprised at the kinds of technology that some of these librarians are using. Like some of them are scanning stuff and tweaking it in Photoshop. There was like a whole Photoshop demo table going on at the MOLA conference, which is always interesting. Kind of the big figure in that exploration is a guy named Joshua Ludi, who used to be Houston Grand Opera and now is the, I think, principal librarian at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. So I co-moderated a panel on iPad screen reading technology with Mark Fabulich, who is assistant librarian at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And then the other panelists were librarians for the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, the I think the Swedish Radio Orchestra, and the Westdeutsche Rundfunk, which is the West German Radio Orchestra, and WDR. If you ever watch WDR videos on YouTube, it's that group. They have an orchestra and they have a choir and they have a big band. And anyway, they had all tried different things or were preparing to try different things. And one of the things they talked about was not just like what buttons to push, because there's lots of places to, like, that's what we might talk about on a podcast like Music Ed Tech Talk. But these librarians want to know, like, how do I actually get this stuff working with this group of 100 people? And that's a bigger consideration. And so we talked about, people using their own devices with Fourscore, which was common. There were lots of stories of librarians who were saying, look, I hand out paper, but I know that I've got a section of people who are scanning the things that I hand them on paper and using Fourscore on stage, and that's fine. How would I do that if the entire orchestra was using Fourscore? And that's a big problem. So that was interesting. A lot of people are looking at things that are not Fourscore from the library's perspective. Like, we as individual musicians, I think, are probably all used to using Fourscore in situations where we're reading a score. But if you are an institutional user, there are options that are a little bit more easy to manage from a library perspective and an administrative perspective, and those are pretty interesting. And so if this is something that you're curious about, actually, I think it's my most recent piece still on scoringnotes.com is a big update to my article comparing the major iPad score reading apps. And I had previously had Fourscore as my best option for most people, and I have changed that a little bit to say that that's the best option for individual users, but I actually think there are better options for an institutional adoption. And my top pick was Newzik, which was one that came up a lot in the conference. And then there was another one by a German-based company, called Demusco, that I had heard of, but had not gotten to experiment with a little bit. And so that's an interesting kind of technology space. And Demusco's an interesting company because it actually works across platforms. So it does some of the managed stuff, like you can upload your scores and send them out to the players that need them and only send the parts to the players that need the parts. And it actually works on iPad, but also works on Android and Windows tablets. So if anybody in the ensemble is like bringing their own, I don't think I would trust like a Windows operating system on a device in a performance situation, because there's just so many things that could go wrong there. And I haven't used tablet Android in a long time, but I would think that it's probably a little bit more stable, a little bit more reliable than iOS. But that was an interesting thing as well. And so all of these things have benefits that Fourscore doesn't have, that the librarians were all very excited about. Like they could make a change in like the bowings of the second violin part and then immediately have that pushed out to everybody in the second violin section, which you really can't do in a meaningful way in Fourscore. Which is not to say there aren't problems with any of these networked solutions, but they're pretty cool. Anyway. That's the conference that I was at. We were in Germany, hosted by the Berlin Philharmonic, which was really cool. So I was hanging out in the Philharmonia in their hall, in their chamber music hall, which was where they had all of the panel discussions, and it was really, really cool. So anyway, if that discussion sounded interesting to you, I would encourage you to check out this episode of the podcast. It is called, I think Philip calls them scoring half notes, where they're not like regular episodes. But anyway,
wow,
yeah, that's what I did this month. Got to go to Germany for a long weekend.
Did you get to meet Tar?
I did not.
Was it in that same hall that was in the movie though?
I haven't seen the movie, but probably.
That's crazy. That would be so cool to get to see. I mean, that the movie was crazy, but it was like the performance venues were just gorgeous. It was pretty cool looking.
So we were in mostly their chamber music hall, which is almost, it looks very similar to the big Berlin Philharmonic hall, just shrunk down. But there was a Berlin Phil concert that I could have gone to, but it was, as you might imagine, quite costly, and the program did not interest me. Like I would love to go hear the Berlin Philharmonic play live sometime, but I'm not going to pay like €60 to hear them play César Franck's Symphony in D minor. No, thank you. If they were playing something cool, I would have done it. I would have gotten a good seat in a heartbeat. I would have spent €200 to hear them play something cool, but I will not spend any money to hear them play.
Yeah, they must be expensive, because in the movie they used the hall but not the orchestra. They used some other orchestra. So it's interesting. That's cool. That sounds like a really cool conference, and you got to go to Berlin too.
Yeah. It gets hosted by a big symphony orchestra every year, so it's almost always in a cool place.
Nice.
Like unlike scholarly conferences, which happen in like random cities, like Baltimore County, Maryland, or something.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in how people are deploying these things and like in managing the digital music, because like on an infinite time scale, I would like to believe that one day maybe my students will have some sort of technology. I definitely gave it a very, very strong effort last school year when we got back from COVID. I tried to see what would happen if we used these like janky old Chromebooks that they're given for free, which we're very grateful that they have, because they mean we can do a lot of things that we couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
But one thing we still cannot do is like meaningful digital sheet music. Like it's just, there's no good software. The screens are unresponsive. There's no great way to get it. They can like use the default PDF reader that Google Chrome has, because that's pretty much their only app that they can have access to. And they can kind of like annotate the screen, but only in a temporary way. And I just couldn't find anything that was good. I mean, do any of these score apps have good web apps or like cloud-based?
Yeah, actually. So there's so first of all, Fourscore does not. Fourscore's only built in native Apple technology, so you're never going to get it on anything other than an Apple device. Having said that, the Newzik has a web interface already, and it is. I don't think it's great for performance, but you could totally use it for the kind of low stakes stuff that you're doing. I'm not sure how the touch annotation thing would work in Newzik on the web, but you can, like, I've clicked and tried to draw with my mouse, which is obviously gonna look like garbage every time, but it does exist as a web app, and that's actually mostly for like the administrative stuff. Like it's a lot easier to drag in 30 files of an orchestral set of parts in a desktop browser than it is to, you know, use the share sheet on an iPad. I will say, and I hope this is okay to share, that I spoke with someone from the Newzik team, and they are interested in building an Android app and a Windows app. And having an Android app would, in most cases, I think, allow it to run on a Chromebook. The other networked solution that I looked at that had a presentation there was Yulia Peska from the WDR orchestras and choirs. They were using an app called Demusco, and that does already have a Windows and an Android app version. I found it to be a little bit less stable. Like even in the demo that the guy from Demusco was giving me, there were some bugs that we ran into, but it is the best cross-platform option at the moment. I mean, I will also say that Encoda is cross-platform, but it's very bad. The score reader is very bad. The library is great, but the score reader is very bad. So, I mean, those would be things that you could try, and I think it would be really interesting to try those kinds of things. I'm going to
go down the rabbit hole later in the summer. I just put a note on my to-do list.
Yeah, excellent.
There's other like hardware issues that I think would prohibit us from making it work, other than the software issue. But yeah, Will,
what's up?
Have you used Final Cut Pro for the iPad?
Yeah.
I have a 2018 iPad without an M chip in it, so you got to tell me the scoop.
I've got an M2 iPad, so it works. It's not something I would probably use for an important project, but it does have, like, that live writing thing is kind of interesting. Like, that is cool. And it makes me wonder.
Write on the video with the Apple Pencil and then it animates it?
Yeah. It animates it over a certain amount of time. It basically makes a little title blob. And I feel like that could be interesting, not just for like making a title. Like you could do like an outline of a thing that's happening in the video and, you know, animate it kind of. That would be like harder to do on the big one. I'm always interested in things that are like better than the thing it's replacing. Like all that talk about sheet music it's really interesting. You mentioned something about your conference and how they could update the bowings on everybody's thing like remotely. That's an improvement on paper.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
a lot of the things that the music publishers are offering are not necessarily an improvement on paper as far as like once it's on the stand and you're in front of a crowd. Sure, it's like more convenient to carry around, but it's like, you know, there's going to be some diehards that are like, I can flip the page faster than you still, you know, that kind of thing. And like, yeah, Final Cut on an iPad feels like that a little bit because it's like, it's still an iPad, so like sure, in a pinch you could cut a video together. I have some multicam video like in a project that I was thinking about importing and trying out the multicam view because that's probably the most useful thing that you can do in Final Cut, honestly, is like over some of the other apps is like just do a quick multicam cut of something. It syncs up the video real nice and you just kind of use the number keys to change which camera you're looking at. It's almost like you're live cutting it after the thing. So I'm glad they did all that. It's funny that now that it's here, I find myself like not necessarily wanting to use it as much, but like, you know, I'm sure it'll come in handy. I'm paying the subscription for a little while just to see if it comes in handy. Logic, it's for one, I feel like Logic is the like better reviewed of the two. It's a little more feature complete from what I hear.
It's sort of the way all of the tech press is kind of highlighting that Final Cut cannot round trip projects between the Mac and the iPad, but that the logic for iPad can. But I'm actually having like a lot of workflow issues, and so to me, I'm like it's hard. Yes, you can open the Logic project you started on the Mac on the iPad, but there are lots of limitations. And as a person who doesn't do like if I were on the go, I could, and I did a lot more serious musical work in Logic, I could totally do a lot of good with this iPad app. It's like got a lot of the same musical tools you would expect on the Mac. But as far as like my needs, like I'm doing a lot of this, like Logic is almost a small utility at times where I'm like opening it up to like EQ a concert recording or like cut something, but like use its finer, quicker tools than say some like cheaper audio. So like for me, like to me the workflow of having it on iPad is the primary selling point. And the first 3 projects I tried to open on the iPad version had a compatibility error of a different nature each. So
yeah, I don't feel like the goal of either one of these is that you're round tripping projects a lot, at least from the big one to the little one, maybe from the little one to the big one. But like I don't picture myself sitting down with either of these apps and being like, I'm making a finished product that's like amazing. And I do feel like both of them have the I need to do something quick, and I don't want to feel like I'm going to hit a ceiling. So that's where like they occupy this new space that's like it's on an iPad, but it's got almost everything you'd want from the big one. And like DaVinci Resolve was doing that last year. I'm glad that there's like a real version of Logic. Man, I would love for a real version of Live to do something like that. But like, okay, the Logic one, I don't use Logic by and large, but like as a utility recording thing that can record lots of tracks, like when our group performs, it would be kind of nice to be able to just plug our, like our Behringer like mixer unit, output all of the USB like inputs into a computer that we're not using like for the thing, and it can just just do a multi-track recording of the whole mixer. That's our mixer doesn't have that feature on board, so that's like that. I wouldn't mind throwing an iPad on top of that and just letting it run the whole time. It's not doing anything that's gonna mess anything up. It's just running in the background, and then I have a Logic project at the end where I can finish it there or bounce the stems. Like that's pretty handy. Or like the multicam thing where like let's say we do a show and we had a couple cameras, and let's say the main limitation I would imagine just based on using the big version for this is you better make sure your camera clocks are all in sync beforehand, because syncing it based on audio when you get like above an hour of video length, it's like pretty taxing. So like I imagine that's worse on the iPad. That would be really handy though, to just be like, and then get everybody's iPhone videos airdropped to you and sync those one by one, and you get this nice multicam cut that you can do right there without having to get the big laptop out. It makes sense kind of to have a bigger laptop if you can do some of those things on an iPad. So, they're doing their job selling hardware. I still like, it's interesting. Like I've got the newest iPad Pro 11 and the Pencil and the Smart. I got all the kit and caboodle, all the accoutrement for this. The Pencil stuff is interesting, but the touch first interface stuff is so not interesting at this point to me.
I wanted to dig into that a little bit actually,
for these
I think
Pro
all 3
apps.
of us,
it's like not interesting. I don't care.
Well, and this is
because I'm not going to use it that way. Like if I'm holding the iPad like it's an iPad, like these apps should really just function kind of like some of the games do on the Apple TV, where they're like, hold it, you need a controller. Like, right. They should just like stop playing that game, stop having to reinvent the wheel with it, unless they really, really, really still feel like this is the future of where all the apps are going to go and the Mac's going to go away, which
I don't get the feeling they believe that anymore with all the stuff going on with the M chip and all this like revitalizing of the Mac platform. I'm wondering though,
maybe, I don't know.
I know that all three of us are team. How Apple does it is different maybe between the three of us, but we're all team iPad, please do more stuff. And I assumed that when we hit like the 6th or so year of the iPad Pro existing and no Logic or Final Cut, I assumed they were either never going to do it or that they had a bigger, longer term thing that was going to solve this problem of like my iPad Pro docked on the Magic Keyboard is pretty much not that different than a MacBook, but the software does so much less. So when finally these apps came out and I heard that they had this completely rethought touch first interface, I thought to myself, oh man, they clearly were not working to some bigger, grander vision. They clearly want to keep the iPad super touch first, which to me I don't know, it just means that instead of this problem, this friction being eventually solved, it means that the iPad will just continue to, like a snail's pace, inch closer and closer to doing more Mac-like stuff, but never really arrive. Maybe that's not a concern anymore with how good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like they
done.
really missed an opportunity to do something cool with the pencil. Like, that's the thing that's unique for the iPad. And the thing that I love about apps that use the pencil in clever ways is that they are clever enough to distinguish between finger input and pencil input. And with rare exceptions, that seems to not happen. I like Robby, I have a 2018 iPad Pro, so I've not used the squiggly drawing thing in Final Cut, but I feel like there's more that they could have done with the Apple Pencil specifically and distinguishing that from the finger input in Logic Pro. And I am probably contrary to both of you, never connecting my iPad to a keyboard. I don't have the Magic Keyboard for iPad, and the only time I ever have a keyboard connected to my iPad is almost always by accident when I do the thing where you drag the cursor off onto the iPad that's over there on the side. And sometimes, I wish that I had a keyboard, but most of the time if I want to do something with a keyboard, I'll grab a Mac, and the thing that I use the iPad for are the things that use the pencil to do things that I can't do on a Mac. I will say to the conversation about what Logic on the iPad is for, if you look at the last like 4 or 5 years of just Logic desktop updates, it seems to me that more than anything, Logic is chasing after the live market, the Ableton Live market, with the live loops stuff. And I think the coolest thing you can do with Logic on the iPad is live loop performance kinds of stuff in kind of, it's obviously not as sophisticated as even the original Push, but it is, a interface with grids and sliders and things that you can do stuff live in a completely self-contained device that you also have to do other stuff with. And that's pretty powerful for a lot of situations. And so I think that's, to me, the thing that the Logic is going to be the best at, though, like Will pointed out, it would be super cool to connect it to a multi-channel interface and just get a rough multi-channel recording going on, especially because if you're, the kinds of nerds that I assume you are, if you've got a MacBook Pro, it's probably on stage doing something else. So
exactly, yeah, it's nice. It's interesting because it's like these tools on the iPad, it is moving at a snail's pace, but they're going from the other direction too, where like a Mac is like starting as like a very advanced Unix machine and making usability a thing. That was kind of always, since macOS 10, that's like the direction it came from. The iPad, on the other hand, is going from like the bottom up, where it's like starts with real easy to understand interactions and these advanced tools. It's like, it's nice to have them there, even though they're not the thing that I'm going to use all the time. I still, like, when I'm just kicking around the house or I just need to browse the web or something, like, I'll pick up the iPad a little faster just because I know there's no like managing I have to do with it. And that's initially what drew me to the Mac. So it's like, there's like a lot of potential here. It is interesting to see like I feel like that, if you give me like on a spectrum, like DaVinci Resolve, which was like a 1-for-1 almost with the desktop version. And then these new things are kind of in the middle. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like Ableton Note, where it's like, this is a very basic phone app that's being blown up to iPad size. I feel like on the iPad, for just like, as long as it had enough utility, I kind of don't need the full feature set, as long as it has like some of the features that I'm expecting it to have. Give Ableton Note an arrangement view and it'll get pretty close to like something that's usable, where like DaVinci Resolve, it's like it really needs the keyboard and mouse, and it's like, this is not better. This is just like a bad version of the desktop. So it's like, I can see why this is like a tough problem to solve. And, I don't, there are people that say like, oh man, we went from nothing on the Mac Classic to Photoshop in 3 years or something, like this shouldn't take this long. But, we're not starting with like years of what a computer can do. We're starting with like a whole different, like, okay, touchscreens are really good. Everything's got to be built back up from touchscreens. It's like maybe it's like, that's the investment for them, is just like the challenge of like getting these things right. I love the jog wheel in Final Cut Pro. That's very cool, very nice. Is it more precise than what I can do on the screen? I don't know, but it's cool. It's very nice. I'm still like, I still don't totally trust the file management on an iPad, but if I were like just moving to iPad today, perhaps I wouldn't feel that way. It's like just years and years of it being really bad maybe like turned me off to storing big files on an iPad. But like, I should probably just like pop some SD cards in and try to edit something on it just to see what it's like, because it's probably not bad. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think that points out another challenge to moving back and forth between devices, especially different operating systems, is that these files that we use in Final Cut and Logic Pro are not just a single file, and they rely on lots of things being in, lots of bits of media being in predictable locations. And I think that's going to be still a big problem for the iPad.
Yeah, and also like audio input and output. There were some rumors that at the developer conference that Apple held last month or this month, that maybe the iPad was going to have some announcements that would kind of solve these file issues, and also maybe give us the opportunity to like control, like have like multiple apps play audio at once, multiple inputs into the iPad. It's all the stuff that like the Mac has been able to do for a long time. Those are gonna continue to be limitations. So I don't know. And we don't have to stop talking about this topic, but my concluding thoughts are that I'm grateful we have them, but I want more. I think.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that hasn't come up yet in our discussion of the things that these air quote pro apps on iPad are good for, or the ways in which they're limited, is I think a lot of people that use Final Cut and Logic on a regular basis, even if they only are doing it like once a week or once a month or something like that, I think we probably all have at least one plugin that we rely on. And the plugin situation on iPad is kind of terrible right now, in part because of the way the App Store works, but just also in part because of limitations in the system and how the software is allowed to talk to other software. We've had audio units on the iPad for many, many years now, and you've been able to use audio unit plugins with any audio software. Like you could use it in GarageBand if you wanted. And that was one of the first things that I tested, is audio unit plugins in Logic. And the 1 or 2 or 3 that I have on my iPad worked great. Actually, I've got a lot more than 3. But anyway, the ones that I had on my iPad worked great. But those are a completely different set of audio units than the ones that live on my Mac. And the ones that live on my Mac are never going to come to the iPad, because the only way they can is through the App Store. And the App Store means that Apple is going to take a 30% cut. And if you're getting like a Vienna Symphonic Orchestra kind of library kind of situation, you need a boatload of storage and about $1,400, and like they're not going to give Apple 30% of their $1,400 sample library pricing.
And you're not going to want to do that on an iPad anyway. I think
Exactly.
it is interesting though to have, like, let's say you have a version of Logic on the iPad and you can use one of those apps that you have. Like I've got like a mini Moog simulator that can run as an audio unit, and like I can just, use that, freeze the track or whatever, like just, flatten it to audio, and then if I need to move that somewhere else, I can. I do picture, like, a lot of times when people like us are talking about professional use of these things, maybe it's different than some other people that are like in stressful situations where they need to do something real fast for a client on a set, on a studio, where it's just like we're on the tour bus, like we need to get this voiceover down now, and like that kind of situation, this could come in real handy possibly. It's just like that new Mac Pro where it's like, who's this for? Probably not for you. Just move on. Don't even worry about it. Like the guys at SNL that have these like $10,000 capture cards are gonna love it, but you regular guy, you should get a Mac Studio. Like I think they need like multiple levels of what they call pro, because
my phone is a professional phone. Didn't you hear?
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah, your professional iPhone.
yeah, my professional AirPods.
That might be the silliest sounding one.
Yeah.
But like I'm talking to you, I feel like Studio is a good brand for that, like other version of Pro, and I'm speaking to you now from an M1 Mac Studio, and it's great. I love it. I have no intention of replacing it with an M2 Mac Studio anytime soon.
Yeah, they're still pretty good.
Yeah. No, I think it's clear that, like, when I used to have I have a 2008 Mac Pro, and I think that it's clear now that at that time the Mac Pro was kind of feasible for a hobbyist or like a really big power user, but now it's the Mac Studio is obviously
and frankly, you can get a
M2
Pro Mac Mini now. Like I think most pros are fine without even the. If the M1 Pro came to a Mac Mini, I probably would have got that instead.
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's that machine is kind of overlooked because the new one's got a different form factor. But yeah, that M1 Pro is plenty for audio people, especially.
Yeah.
You know what I do like about any of the Pro ones is they have that media engine that's essentially like the Afterburner card.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, I think. That I didn't realize even until recently that was one of the things that made that a Pro chip. I thought it was just bigger or faster or whatever. But yeah, that's a big deal.
You mentioned something that I actually do hope will happen in these iPad apps earlier is the bouncing of, like, if you have a track that has a third-party plugin on it that's not available on a different operating system, I do think it would be kind of cool that if they did some magic where it like kind of bounces it as audio so that you can still hear it. Because when I just can't hear tracks that have plugins on them when I'm on the iPad version, which is fine for the first version. But I know that Pro Tools has had for years now this kind of cloud collaboration thing where you can like have a guitarist in another country like opening the same Pro Tools project, and it's doing something really similar to that. Like if they don't have the same plugins as you, it's kind of just like letting them hear a mix of where you last left everything. So that would be kind of nice if they could.
So it would have to do
that.
like a sneaky bounce in place in the background and then like hide the audio that it made from you.
I feel like GarageBand did that since the early years.
That's interesting.
Like it had because it could do the quick look preview, which can't use any MIDI stuff. So like
that's
where you could do just press the play on the .band file. So I mean that's a feature that's there. It's been there forever. I don't know if they're using it or not, or if you have to click it on or something, because it probably takes a little extra time.
Well, we've talked about a couple of products that were announced at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference earlier this month. Should we move to that?
Let's do it.
Sure.
Okay, David, did you want to say anything about Dorico 5 first? I don't have
Dorico
a lot
5
to say about it.
exists. You should check it out. If you're a Dorico user, it's good. It's a good update. It's very limited as far as score production stuff goes. It's got some interesting audio features, notably the stage designer, where you can place audio sources on a stage and it tries to treat them acoustically as though they are in that space, which is kind of interesting. But I feel like if you were already using something like Note Performer or sample libraries through expression mapping, then it's some ways not going to help you out, because those sample libraries were already recorded in an acoustic space with a player in a specific location. So you're not getting anything out of Dorico faking that. But if you were using something that didn't have that, or if you were using the built-in Dorico sounds, then you might get to play around with it a little bit, and it is fun. I will say the biggest things are just a big collection of these small little like quality of life improvements, real small little shortcut changes and things like that. My favorite little small thing is when you are entering dotted note values, if you just double press the note value button, it will switch the dotted value on. So instead of, because normally you would have to use the period or full stop key, which is in the opposite part of the keyboard from the number row, at least on a US English keyboard, and I think probably most other keyboards. Now, if you want to enter a dotted quarter note, instead of typing the 6 key and then moving your hand, the goal is to not move your hand, right? Because presumably your other hand is doing something else, like playing a MIDI keyboard. You can just double press the 6 key and it will turn on a dotted quarter note, and then you double press it again to turn it off, or maybe you press it once again to turn it off. Anyway, that's like a fun little way to get into that stuff. And there's a bunch of little small things like that throughout. There's a good font fix. There's like about a page and a half, 2 pages of the release notes that is basically the transcript of an email exchange between me and John Barron at Steinberg about how it handles fonts on the Mac, which is a nice improvement for those of us that are big font nerds on the Mac. But in general, it's a new Dorico. You should get it. It's probably, I will say, as much as I love John and Daniel and the whole Steinberg scoring team, this is by far the lightest major, X.0 release of Dorico. So if it doesn't have anything in it that you need, like, nobody's got a gun to your head telling you need to buy it, and you can hold off until there's an update. And they have a pretty good track record of updating and adding pretty significant features in point updates. So 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. So if there's nothing in there for you, nobody, just wait until 5.1 comes out. I'm sure they'll have something eventually.
Cool. Good mini review. I dig it.
So wait. I'm like so outside of that world. Can you just catch me up like real quick? Because like in my head, there's Finale and Sibelius still.
Yeah.
And they still exist.
They do.
But then there's Dorico, which is like Sibelius core team left again and then formed Dorico. Is that
Yep.
the narrative? And then there's the online tool, Note Flight. Is that the one that I'm thinking of?
Mm-hmm. That's big with teachers, at least in my county.
So that's like the equivalent to Soundtrap.
Yes.
For us. Dorico is like the Ableton Live. Finale's like the Pro Tools.
Yeah, I think we're working on a good. And I don't know what
Sibelius is.
Cubase? Logic. Oh, Logic is probably
Something like
better.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's just making sure I understand the landscape.
if you're on Finale and you've got another 20 years left in your career, now's about time to start looking for a life raft out of Finale. I'm not convinced that they're going to be a going concern when I'm thinking about retirement, to say nothing of when I'm thinking about lunch next week. They cut their price pretty significantly, which feels to me like a kind of a desperation move. But they have not, I don't think, invested significantly in the product in a very long time. So if they are still around, it's because they got sold to some company that is going to do something with them. But right now, I don't see it.
All right.
Some people are diehard about it though, and just
and that's reasonable. If you've got like thousands of Finale files that you've made over your career, that's totally reasonable. But like, if you're going to keep throwing good money after bad, there's a Wikipedia article about the sunk cost fallacy, I'm sure.
Today, I would like to introduce you to my scale exercise play along tracks with trap beats, available for sale at robbyburns.com. These trap beat play-alongs include over 72 audio recordings, each of which includes a count-off, a trap beat at 70 beats per minute, and a tuning drone playing both the tonic and each note of the scale in just intonation, so your ensemble can learn to play and tune, develop steady, sustained tone, and blend with other sounds. These drones are stacked over top engaging trap beats that help students to practice at slower tempos while developing steadiness of time and a better concept of how the beat is subdivided. The scale exercises include whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, scale and thirds, and a mini scale with an arpeggio at the end in all 12 keys. I have also included 3 speed variations of a Remington exercise, so band ensembles can work on their favorite tone and technical exercises, whether they be from a method book or of your own invention. The tracks are $15, but for $40, you can get the stems to the tracks in Logic Pro and GarageBand format, so that you can do things like speed them up and slow them down, change the pitch, add your own accompaniment, take out my voice and add your own,
and 2 and 3 and go,
or even sequence the tracks together to completely automate your ensemble warm-up. These tracks are perfect for running through your Google Meet, Zoom, or virtual teaching platform of choice, or for running through the loudspeakers at the beginning of your in-person rehearsal. Check them out now at robbyburns.com/store. All right.
Boom.
Developer conference. So my favorite thing to watch.
Happy
I like
Appleness to all who celebrate.
Yep.
Yes, Christmas in June. I'm always more into this conference than even like the iPhone and any other products that are released every year, because like I would like to see like what is my software going to be able to do for me next. And I think in the school, it's always coming out in the fall, so it's like next school year, like what can I be thinking about, my work and changing it in subtle ways. And this year was especially exciting because we Apple did really announce, and I guess have since released, you can buy a 15-inch MacBook Air, which I know that for a lot of teachers out there who want that price point, or just that's good enough for them, but they just want a bigger screen size, which I imagine is a lot of people. That sounds like, by all accounts, a really great machine. The Mac Studio got an update. The Mac Pro got an update. None of those computers are for me, so I don't have a lot to say about them. But then we got a ton of software updates and then an entirely new product category and app development platform. So what do you think? Like, does anybody want to talk Macs at all, or do we go straight to the other stuff?
I think if we need to touch on anything, it's got to be that game porting toolkit. That thing works, man.
Have you tried it?
Yeah, I got to, I don't know, it didn't work with every game I tried it with, but and it supposedly can work on Ventura with Intel processors too. I couldn't get it to work on my Hackintosh, but I got it to work on my MacBook Air M2. And I was able to play Sable, which is a very PC-only game that has decent graphics needs to it, and
very PC only is a good expression.
Yeah, it was very playable. It was a little glitchy. I mean, it reminded me a lot of the early days of using crossover games to play Portal, with OpenGL or whatever. Except they're doing it for these DirectX games. I think it's great. That's like that was buried in there, but that is like a truly big deal.
Yeah, Apple, they made some gaming moves, and it's easy to roll your eyes because like Apple is famously bad at not taking, they're bad at gaming and they don't take it super seriously. They've kind of fell into it on iOS because the App Store has been so successful for them in mobile games, but it's more of an accident than anything else. So like, what exactly is the technology that they announced at WWDC that makes gaming better for the Mac? And then like what did you actually as a user, because I'm like not up on this at all, like what did you actually as a user do?
So Wine is the technology behind it, which has been around forever. Just it's like a Windows simulation environment. It stands for Wine is not an emulator. It's one of those weird open source acronyms. But the move to Apple Silicon and the DirectX 12 stuff made it really hard for them to proceed. So Apple contributed, I don't know, some big patch to Wine so that not only would it run on Apple Silicon, but they can provide a simulation environment for developers that are about to, thinking about porting their game to Mac. And essentially what it does is it does a translation layer from DirectX 12 to Metal. And you don't have to do anything. It just kind of does it. And then you can see how close you are to having a running game, and then go back and make the changes to make it run full speed and not have to run under an emulator. It's not really an emulator, but it's anyway, what's funny is the average person can also just download the game porting toolkit and either through the command line or a couple little UI apps that people, I'm pretty sure they just wrote them on the airplane home from WWDC. These apps, like I'm using this app called Whisky, and you just drag the game porting toolkit in. It sets up an environment, and then you install Steam in there, the Windows version of Steam. And then once you've got the Windows version of Steam, you can launch games from inside of it. And they either run or they crash, but that's all you have to do. It's pretty straightforward for a non-programmer type person to play around with it and at least kind of see the same possibility. So any of these developers, I guess, could take their games and do whatever they need to do with these tools to bake that translation layer in and eliminate some of the bugs, and could release Mac versions of these games, that'd be great.
Which presumably would be like
yeah.
more performant than like you or me just running Steam through Whisky.
Right? Oh, totally. Yeah. They gave a demo of it where like, after they optimized the game, it went up like 30 frames per second or something. And so, yeah, it's, but it, the main translator between DirectX and Metal is there. And I guess developers know what to do with the next, how to get it the rest of the way there without a whole lot of extra work.
So it's not actually emulating Windows, it's just translating like DirectX, which is the Windows graphics technology. It's like translating DirectX calls into Apple's Metal system. Is that right?
Something like that. I mean, it kind of feels like it's emulating Windows because every now and then a Windows control panel pops up and looks like Windows 95. But yeah, it almost reminds me of the classic environment back when OS X was new, and you'd open a window and it had the weird stuff from old Macs for a little bit. Like that's almost what it reminds me of when you run one of these apps. And again, Crossover's been around for a while using this, but this works way better. So yeah, pretty cool game porting toolkit. Way bigger of an announcement than any of the operating systems they announced. The operating systems
they were all
weak.
pretty light, but there was some quality of life features on the Mac. in the iOS end of things and the watchOS end of things, I guess, that I really like. Maybe I'll just call out a few. I really am
I'm
pretty
running
happy
them all,
to see.
so yeah.
You're running them all? Well, then you should talk about the things that are standing out. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm running them all.
Wow.
No, I'm curious what you think the quality of life issues are.
I'm mostly focused now on what I'm gonna do with Whisky as soon as this Zoom call ends. Because
Definitely try it.
I'm
Be
staring
patient,
at
though.
my Steam Deck that I got so that I could play Windows Steam games.
They did say that the way that it does it is really similar to how the Steam Deck works, where I think they call it Proton or something. Very similar to that.
Cool. So, Robby, what are the things you're excited about? As soon as he started talking, he broke up.
He's frozen. So, yeah, I'm always just an idiot because school's out and I don't have a lot to do. I updated everything except the Hackintosh. Even my, as soon. No, there he goes.
All right. Well, I'm still recording here.
The laptop was the last one to go. I probably shouldn't have updated that one, but I was really wanting to run the game porting thing, and I thought that might help. I noticed almost nothing on the Mac. Like there's a new wallpaper. Like there's really whatever. Like I notice almost no changes that are obvious. Like there's a couple buttons in Safari that got moved. Like that's what it feels like. The iPad probably feels the most changed of the three, because you get the new home screen, but that's just like the home screen you had for a year on your phone. And Stage Manager is interesting. Stage Manager is a little better.
I tried it for about 10 seconds last year and bailed hard because I did not like it.
It's weird. I actually kind of like it on the Mac a little better than I like it on the iPad, because it keeps the view clean. The iPad, it is interesting. Like you really notice the real estate is small on the iPad. So like losing an inch to the dock is kind of a big loss, you know, when you're just like in Safari. So yeah, I mean, is it super useful compared to the, I mean, I don't know. They did make it easier to like if you shift click to open something, if you have the keyboard, it'll add it to the current workspace, which is kind of funny because that's not how the Mac one works. But and anyway, they did a couple little improvements to Stage Manager that are fine, but nothing huge. The music app on the phone definitely got reconfigured around because that's the most buggy thing in these developer betas.
Music app?
The music app on the phone kind of crashes when I'm using CarPlay, but no, I mean, they're all very light updates. They're like 0.5 updates, all of them. Even the watch is definitely the most dramatic because they changed what the buttons do. So like, I don't know if you can see this here, but like when you press the crown, you get this. It's the same thing, but it scrolls up and down. It doesn't go left and right or zoom anymore.
Yeah. I have mine set
I'm
to
pumped
be a
about
list,
these
the honeycomb
widgets
thing,
because
but
I already use one of these wacky watch
the
faces
other
with like
button
9
now pulls up the
complications, and I will
control
additionally
panel.
be thrilled to have a scrolly widget list under it.
Scrolling
What
from
happens
your watch
if
face
you
now brings
use
up
widgets in combination
So,
with the
like,
Siri
it's-
watch
it's
face,
interesting.
which by default
That is
is
actually
already kind of
probably
like
all
a
good changes.
chronological widgety
I'm
looking
very curious about the
list
widgets
of app
because, like,
data.
if you want to
and
actually
it
have your
responds to
computer watch
the
do computer
crown
watch things
when
now,
scroll.
you have
so
to
what
make the
happens
watch
if you
face
both
pretty
have
ugly.
that and widgets?
Right.
And I would love for my watch to look like a watch and then only be a computer watch when I need it to be a computer watch.
Yeah, that's really nice because I can just have like a traditional watch face, scroll up, there's the weather. Like that's
what I
real
want.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, those silly watch faces that have like a billion things on them, that sucks.
Yeah,
Nobody
they look
wants
terrible.
that.
They look terrible.
So that one
so I might have to try
behaves
that too.
Slightly different from all the other ones, but it's giving you the same stuff. They might change that before it's over. before they're done developing this, actually, because that is kind of inconsistent.
I would think you almost have to keep it that way, though, because otherwise the Siri watch face doesn't do any of the things that it's good at.
I didn't think it was good at anything, so I've never used it.
Well, if you can't scroll the list, then you can only do the top 1 or 1.5 Siri recommendations.
Yeah, no, you can scroll it. It's like the way it's scrolling it doesn't look like the new interface.
Right.
It's like the new one looks better.
Right.
So is the only way you can get to the new widgets from that watch face to swipe up then? Or does continuing to scroll eventually get you widgets?
I don't know. I'm not seeing a way to get those widgets. It's kind of interesting.
Even
Again,
if you swipe up from the
perhaps
bottom?
this whole change was made because so few people are using the Siri watch face as possible.
Probably
swiping
true.
up from the bottom, it still gives me more of the Siri watch face. I have a weird feeling that watch face is going away. Because
I like that
the
watch face.
new thing looks like a better version of what that one's trying to do. Yeah. So yeah, that I when you try it, you'll be like, the Siri watch face is unnecessary. Like, that's my thought on it.
So I haven't installed any of the betas yet. I'm curious. You said that you've got it on everything. Have you tried any of the new Safari features on the Mac? I'm possibly interested in Safari profiles and web apps on the Mac.
Safari profiles. The web apps I did try.
How are the web apps?
It's fine. Whatever. Who cares? Like, it's like I put it on Gmail and I was like, whatever. I'm probably not going to use this because I don't want to see a Gmail icon. The way it does private browsing is different now. I haven't really messed around with it much, and I have not messed around with the profiles. Although that did look kind of interesting. I just haven't gotten a chance to set up any of those profiles yet. In fact, I don't know. I'm looking at it right now. Oh yeah, it does have profiles. It's by default. It just doesn't show anything though. It doesn't bug you to set them up or anything. So,
I like the idea of it keeping a separate copy, like a separate set of bookmarks and a separate set of cache files and a separate set of login tokens and everything.
Yeah,
So
it totally
that's
makes sense.
That's a great idea, and I would use the heck
one
out
of the
that.
Chrome features that's kind of nice to see, because especially if you're worried your school's tracking you or whatever when you search things, that's
right.
actually not bad. I there's one situation where I ran into a point where I was like, I wish I had that thing from Chrome. I feel like if it thinks I'm logged in as my school, because I'm logged in on both Gmails,
Right.
different tabs, and it was like Google Flights was blocked if it thought I was logged in as the school. It just wouldn't let me see this website of Google
That's
Flights,
weird.
which was really strange. So random stuff like that, but that's pretty uncommon. I'm trying to even
I've been using the Arc
Fine.
browser a little bit, and it has some of those features. I haven't explored them too much in Arc, and I'm not actually using Safari that much because of all of the flexibility and customization in Firefox and Arc are so fun that I find Safari to be a little bit limiting. But the idea of the web apps and profiles is really interesting to me, and so I might try Safari for a little bit once I get all these things on all my things. I'm not a big tab hoarder, so I never really got into tab groups too much.
neither did I.
I feel like this is the super useful version of what tab groups was trying to do. That when I am doing school stuff, I can have a set of browser plugins that are only for school stuff, and that has my LMS links and my course catalog links and all those kinds of things that are there in the toolbar. But I don't need to see the system to log in and admit graduate students when I'm browsing the web normally. And so that would be,
Right.
I'm looking forward to playing around with that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds, I'll probably play around with it once school starts. Yeah, outside of that, this was one of the lightest updates. I'm sure under the hood there's some changes. Like, it's interesting being part of the Hackintoshing community where they really notice all the little changes because it breaks their computer as soon as they
Right.
update. And they're like, oh my gosh, guys, the Wi-Fi stack was tweaked slightly and nothing works now. You know, that kind of stuff. So they're doing other stuff that they're not announcing, but the average person will never, ever notice it. So,
Sure. But I mean, like, those are good things for them to be doing, because I'm sure,
Yeah.
like,
Let
we
them
all get
focus on that.
frustrated at, like, and I don't know, 10 years ago, I used to have to turn my Wi-Fi off and on my MacBook, you know, a couple of times a week just to get it to do normal stuff. And I haven't had to do that in, 8 years. And, we run into Bluetooth nonsense all the time. We haven't had to do that in a super long time either. So, it's good. I know it's annoying for people that are, kind of hacking around the edges of this stuff, but I think in the long run, it's going to be good. The other thing that I'm kind of excited about, and this is the one thing, I feel like such an idiot for saying this out loud. The one thing that would make me want to install iOS 17 beta on my phone, and I've almost done it with the developer beta. I can't bring myself to do the developer beta. Maybe public beta 1 in a couple of weeks is standby mode. I would love to. Standby mode is the new like nightstand clock
yeah,
thing.
that works really well.
Like,
I
because
don't
I've
have
got
a stand that
MagSafe
does that.
stands everywhere, and
Yeah, it
I would
works.
love.
It's really nice.
I would love to have that on my nightstand.
It reminds me of those little travel clocks you used to have,
Yeah.
where it's little clock and calendar next to it. Yeah, that's pretty slick. I've got the MagSafe Duo charger, so like I never set it that way, but yeah,
So
that's a
if you're
cool
listening to this
feature.
and you did not watch the WWDC presentation, what we're talking about is if your phone is charging and turned horizontal, it does not work vertically. But if your phone is charging and turned horizontal, it will display a special like nighttime screen of a clock, and I think you can have widgets on there too. But you can just have like a bedside clock, which for those of us who have pretty much embraced the phone does all the alarms and everything, you might not have a clock anymore on your nightstand. And so to me, I find it annoying if I wake up in the middle of the night, mostly because an animal wakes me up in the middle of the night, I can look and see what time it is very quickly just by turning my head, and I don't have to like wake up my phone to see. And it does it in a pretty unobtrusive way. Like if you've got a relatively recent iPhone with an OLED display, it's not super bright. It's only lighting up the pixels that are displaying stuff. It tries to be, I think it uses a red color so that it doesn't disturb you and
it's
wake
red.
you up as
And
much.
you can change it too. I mean, there's and you just like flip it to change it. Like you just like scroll through a little to.
Oh, like on the
change
watch,
what's
like changing
on
the
it.
color on the watch. Face.
Yeah, I don't know if you can change the color, but like changing if you want it to show your calendar or just a date or whatever's on the right side of it, you can just kind of swipe to change it. It's cute. Yeah, it's funny. I forgot about that feature because if you don't have that stand, it just never happens. You just never
Right.
notice it. So
Right. But
there's
it looks nice.
maybe a pop-up the first time it's activated to say, hey, what's happening? But yeah, there's not like anything to call your attention to it. So I imagine a lot of people will just never know that that's a feature.
Well, I've got a MagSafe stand on my nightstand, on my desk at home, and on my desk in my office at the university. And so I would love for it to display a clock to me all the time, because I don't really have a clock in my office either, and it would be great to have that, because I have a tendency to talk too much and run over on lessons, and that would be a great way to keep me honest there.
Totally, yeah. I'm sure there's a few uses for it. Yeah, it's funny. I was just playing around. The stage manager behavior on the Mac is very different than the iPad still. Um, I found myself using Stage Manager when I'm presenting because it keeps the desktop clean. It keeps
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
sidebar clean. It just keeps it a little cleaner for the people watching, and you can hide your dock and still see your stuff. Like, that's pretty useful. On the iPad, a little less useful still. It's nice. It's cute. I really feel like losing the stoplight button was a poor choice. I don't know why they need to get away from the stoplight because everybody loves the stoplight button. Like,
It's very clear.
It's very obvious what it does, and it's simple. It's minimal still. They want to go even more minimal than that, but like, it's almost too minimal, I think. Like, you need something to let you know what you're going to do with that window that's not a right click.
And with
that
a smaller
essentially
display, like that like you said earlier, taking that little bit of extra space for the user interface for the stage managing stuff, for like managing the stage manager, that's a lot of screen real estate that's taken over by that. And I think with the smaller screens, I get plenty of utility out of just the old side-by-side split view apps and occasionally a slide over app that is not super enhanced in a meaningful way for the drawbacks of Stage Manager. Like, it's actually better for the things that I'm doing to just have them in full screen and split view than to have a bunch of stuff in Stage Manager.
The nice thing is when you have two apps kind of manually arranged into something that's like split view, and then you go full screen, it does split view. So like it gives you another way to get into that mode at least.
Well, that's
so
not too
that
bad.
is kind of nice sometimes. Robbie's talking to me from the Phantom Zone over here. What's he saying? How's it going, everyone?
I'm the 314.
It's a Verizon problem. Oh man, we're still. Well, okay. I'm just in text. We'll land the plane for you. Man, that's rough. I've been in that situation before where like the power kept going out when I was trying to do something like this. It's the worst. Okay, so Robby really should be around for the big talk here, but
he's gonna miss out.
The show must go on.
Maybe he'll have to like record his thought and put a little parenthetical in somewhere.
Well, here we'll leave a spot for him to.
Yeah. Robby, what do you think?
What are your thoughts on the Apple Vision Pro? Give us your spiciest take.
Robby here from the Phantom Zone to say that Apple Vision Pro seems good. Lots of people will say they will not buy one, and then will buy one anyway.
And there's a little silence. He can just like add in what he's going to say there. Wow. That's exactly, wait, hold up. One of us can agree and one of us can disagree. Yeah, that's not what I thought it was going to do. No, I got to say, that was a thrilling announcement. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, and it seemed like they have, like, from the experiences that journalists got to have at the event, that they have either met or exceeded the quality of even the pretty high-ish, maybe not like five-figure, tens of thousands of dollars, super pro headsets, but this is like a VR headset that is at least as good as something like the Meta Quest Pro, and in really important ways much better than the Meta Quest Pro, and is maybe more geared toward things that are not gaming. So I thought the way that they dealt with the outside environment was really cool, and making sure that you're not completely disconnected from your actual physical space and the people that are in your physical space with you was really cool. The gesture based navigation where you're just looking at stuff. All of the reports that I read said that it was amazingly responsive and accurate, which is really cool. I've never experienced anything like that. I don't have a Meta Quest. I don't have a PSVR or HTC whatever.
Have you tried one of those devices out?
Only very briefly, like in a store.
Okay, I had a friend bring a Meta Quest over one time, and we all played around with it for a while. And just the difference in how, like, just the philosophy behind these things, like, keep aside the how much better the hardware is, but just like, okay, the Apple one, from all the reports, you put it on and you just see the view. It waits to, like, you know, it onboards you first, but then normally you just put it on and you just see the room, like you're looking through it. And like, there's, you know, you could just stay there for a while if you want to. The Meta one that I tried, not only is it like not that, it's like a big menu system that you're kind of looking around, but I was just shocked that like one of the included demos is basically like you're gonna jump off a building. Like, so like my first experience with VR with your new thing that you made that you say is the future is I'm supposed to like kill myself. Like I'm supposed to throw myself off a building. Wow, that was so realistic. Like, what am I supposed to think about? Like, what you want me to use this for now? Like, okay, maybe games, but like, what a stupid demo. Like, what a dumb demo. Anyway, that I was like almost like offended by that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, that's what I'm supposed to use this for? Like, where this was like, first of all, you don't have to go inside of the machine. You're in your room still. First of all, let's deal with that. And then second of all, your primary thing is going to look really familiar. And it's like, I think that was the smart move. Yeah, I've read all of I think they only let like 10 people try it. And they all had this very tightly controlled demo, no photos allowed. Apparently there's a top head strap that's why they weren't allowed to take photos, because
you can see it. There is very briefly in the video from the keynote. It's not in all of the shots, but it's in like one or two of the shots.
Yeah, they didn't want you to look at that, I guess. That's you know, they're still tweaking it, I guess. But yeah, every person left that just thinking like, wow, that's unbelievable. Whatever I just saw was unbelievable. It really reminded me of the iPhone demo where, like, you know, you thought that technology was coming, but it was years away, and it's actually not years away. It's coming this next year, and you're like, whoa, oh.
Yeah.
So we could have had something really great, and it's, you know, it's either such a laughably high price or whatnot, but it's here. You know, that's really impressive to be able to bring anything like that to market. And yeah, from what I'm reading, the two chips, the R1 is essentially an M2, but running a real-time operating system like a car would run, for stuff that can't ever drop frames. It can't ever slow down for any reason. It has to work 100% of the time. So that it's just designed really different. And by making all of the sensors run through that and all of the AR tracking run through that, it's able to do some fancy things.
And the processors are like attached to the displays, the very, very, very super high res displays that are in each eye, so that like the electrons don't have to go very far, which is insane that that's the level of like I don't know, the level of detail that you need to go into to make this as performant with as little lag as possible. Because that's how people get like motion sick from virtual reality, right? Is when their motion is not represented as quickly in what they see as it is in, their actual eyeballs in the world. And so like soldering the processor onto the LED display that's inside the glasses is how they got there, which is incredible. And it leads me to think that any repair to this thing is basically going to be impossible.
At least at first. Yeah. I mean, that's what remains to be seen is like which of those two chips needs to be there, because you theoretically could, put one of them further away, and the real-time one, the one that keeps it all at 12 milliseconds, probably has to stay right there.
Right.
But it'll get smaller and smaller. The interface is just great.
And I think it's hard to talk about without experiencing it. Like, I can show you my phone and you can see my phone, but I can't show you my virtual reality experience.
Right.
I think that's gonna make this for lots of reasons a hard sell, especially if you, like me, don't live near an Apple store where you can check one out in person.
Did you happen to catch some of the details on how the front-facing display works?
Yes, it's fascinating. It's
that
so
is
clever.
Incredibly
it's
fascinating.
so clever. Do you want to talk about it?
Lenticular display.
Yeah.
It's and they didn't really go into that. They just said, "Look at this. It's so good. It works." But like I don't know if you watched the talk show where they, John Gruber interviews the people that made it. I guess it knows who's looking at you from where they're at, and it will render a different picture for them. For whoever's looking at you, it'll render different pictures.
Well, it does that. That's the lenticular part, right? So like it's like a hologram where if you look at it from one angle, it looks like one thing, and if you look at it from another angle, it looks like a different thing. And so it's rendering all of those different angles of what your eye looks like all the time. And you just see one of them depending on where you're standing.
Okay, I couldn't tell if it was doing that or if it was doing something based on tracking the people, because it can also track the people like as they break into your view. So like, I was having a little. They didn't go super in depth on it. I have to see that to believe. It sounds like a big 3DS display that like wraps around your face almost.
Well, and that's how they make it look like the thing that you're seeing is actually looking through the glasses and set back from the surface. Like the display is actually on the surface of the goggles, but they make it look like you're looking through it and seeing the person's eyes where they actually are on their face.
That's
which
incredible.
Which is just it's like not computationally difficult. It's not like advanced technology, like lenticular like lenses and screens have been around for 100 years or more. They're just combining these things in a really clever way to make you still look like a human and not a bug-eyed monster to your friends and family.
Yeah, that's I can't wait to see that in person.
Yeah, that's one.
It really has the effect of wearing ski goggles. Like that looks like something we've seen before. That's really clever.
I can't wait to see it in a tech YouTuber video because I'm not going to get to go see one in person anytime soon, but I think it's going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah, they mentioned something that sounded a little like the first Apple Watch try-ons, where you schedule an appointment to try it out at the Apple Store. I look forward to doing that at some point.
But I would feel, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't feel bad about it, but I would feel bad scheduling an appointment and having zero intention of purchasing one because, and we got pretty far into this discussion without talking about how much it costs, but it's more expensive than my Mac Studio and Apple Studio display combined. It is $3,500 plus tax in the United States.
How big is that studio display?
It is
1,000 inches.
It is a mere 27-inch display. It has more Ks. than many displays. But anyway, that's a good point, though, is that this thing could replace a fancy display if you don't mind wearing this thing on your head while you're working. And that remains to be seen whether that's a thing that would be comfortable to do for a long period of time. But I think that is the demo that I think most appeals to the way I would want to use something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Is to connect it to a Mac or an iPad and use it as your external display, and it can project. It does it wirelessly, which I think is why it's limited to a 4K virtual display, because that's as many pixels as they can push wirelessly. Obviously, the device itself is capable of many more pixels than that, but you can make that 4K display very, very big and move your head around and have other stuff in there as well. Presumably, you could have your 4K display mirrored from your Mac, and then other applications running natively on the Vision Pro that are like basically iPad apps that you could run side by side, and that could be pretty darn cool.
What are they? We don't know what they are. Are they iPad apps? Are they Mac apps? Are they Who's What's It's new thing? They didn't really go into that because nobody's written any yet.
Yeah.
But okay, so if this thing's as comfortable to wear as the AirPods Max, for example, I was just like yesterday, I was watching a movie and doing some chores around the house. I was the only one in the house. It was just me, and I didn't feel like missing some lines from the movie as I changed rooms. So I did the thing where you hook the AirPods up to the TV and just kind of had the TV in the other room as I was walking and doing chores. Had the AirPods Max on for a long time. If I had this on and it worked as well as it says it does, I mean, the TV could follow me around. Like, right. I could picture doing that if it's comfortable. If it's not comfortable, fat chance. And I that's why I think the first one's got to be expensive, because the tech is crazy, but also perhaps this is more full featured than the normal person one that'll eventually come. Like the basic tech that's making it work well is probably really expensive right now, but that can come down. Like the R1, the screen stuff, that can all come down in price. The front facing goggle display possibly is like a thing that, if you had an actual see-through one or something that just couldn't totally close you in a movie theater, or if you had a cheaper way of doing that, possibly, maybe that's why it's the Pro. I thought it was really interesting to introduce a new product that has no other peers as the Pro version of the Vision.
Yeah.
What's the non-Pro one? We don't even know this thing yet. It's the Pro one, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you're gonna love the Vision Air.
And for the cost, you are getting an M2 chip plus an R1, which is basically like an M2 chip. You're getting the equivalent of the most expensive component of two very nice MacBooks. Yep. And I assume that's the vast majority of their cost to produce them. And maybe there is a still very nice, like you're saying, well, maybe there's still a very nice but not gajillion-dollar version of it, in the same way that they got away from making desktop displays for a while, and then their first display was the Pro Display XDR, which cost $5,000 plus another $1,000 for the stand. And then a year and a half later, they released the display that I'm currently looking at you on, the Apple display, the Apple Studio display, which is still very costly at $1,200 plus a stand, but still way, 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 way less than the $5,000 Studio Display XDR. So maybe there's going to be a $1,400 version that's still, almost as expensive, or $1,500 is the price of a Meta Quest Pro, I think. So I'm sure that if Apple made something at a similar price point, it would be, better than that, for at least for the things that I want to do. One thing that we talked about a lot earlier when we were talking about the Mac was gaming, and how Apple's not, always been great at that. They didn't really show any games at all on the Vision Pro, and I wonder if that's going to be a deal breaker for people who are, thinking about spending a lot of money on a thing that can't do the main thing that other virtual reality headsets do right now.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, like, the whole pro thing. Like, do you remember how the iPhone was kind of a pro thing when it first came out until, like, the iPhone 5 was, like, when they first started segmenting it? Like, I wonder if they're going to follow that model where it's, like, this big, expensive thing is just going to be a big, expensive thing while they develop it, while they build the ecosystem, while they get the cost down, and then like later we'll have the cheap one that does most of the same stuff, and they'll add features to the expensive one. Yeah, I can't wait to try it out. I think it's really interesting. It was a truly exciting announcement that I feel like we haven't had one of those in a while. Like the watch was a totally different announcement. That was like a Johnny Ive,
That's more about a fashion.
Kind of Yeah. It had that fashion angle to it that they totally dropped eventually. They didn't totally drop it, but like, boy, they really pulled that lever hard on that first one. He's like working with gold and stuff like that. Like that was a totally different announcement. That was cool in a different way. But this reminded me a lot of the iPhone, the very first one. So that's exciting that they can still kind of pull that rabbit out of the hat every now and then and just be like, hey, guess what? Here's the future. Is something that you didn't expect. So
Robby's
cool.
back. How many are you going to buy, Robby?
Thanks to my sponsors this week, Squarespace and did you finish the show?
We're getting to the end. We're about to land the plane. We got to do the top 5 or whatever there is. The top 2.
I caught a big chunk of that. Good show, everyone. I'm having Wi-Fi issues like none before. But a lot of what you're saying is resonating with me a lot. I don't think that this is a product that I will buy, but you can hear in my tone that I did have thought about it a little. Will, are you going to buy this thing?
I'm definitely going to go to the appointment and try it on.
Yeah.
And it'll be hard if I've got money sitting around that month. It possibly would be hard to say no, but then again, I don't want to be stuck with a big piece of, it's one of those things you don't know how long it's going to be between updates.
Right.
You don't know what kind of support it's going to have starting out. I am going to ride the hype train all the way to the tryout.
Yeah, well, I certainly will be doing that.
Buying
it's one of these. It's so personal. So many of the things about the user interface that you all are commenting on, and just that feeling of like it, sort of looking through it, as they talked about in the keynote. Those things I think are going to pair differently with me being logged into all my own work than a demo in the store. I think the demo in the store will wow me, but I think there's something to like, yeah, this is my messages app, my notes, my whiteboard.
Well, I wonder if
whiteboard.
you were going into that appointment, what if you brought your MacBook and connected it as an external display to your MacBook?
That would be very cool.
That would
be very cool.
So
they're not going to let you do that.
Like even
so?
to like AirPlay
Zero.
to the. Really?
No. Do you remember the watch tryouts?
No.
It ran a demo loop. It didn't actually. You couldn't interact with it.
Huh.
It was just to try it on. And
interesting.
And say,
well, that was before the watch actually
millimeter
released,
like?
right? They started doing that like a month or two before you could actually buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I made one of those appointments right away. I was like, I got to try this thing. But yeah, you couldn't interact with it at all. It was interesting.
Interesting.
I imagine this will have a tightly controlled demo that they're already rehearsing in some ways.
I mean, so I was not interested in it at all until I saw the actual presentation at WWDC earlier this month, and I think it might have even been in the most recent holiday special, Robby, you asked like, how much would you pay for this thing? And I think I said like, I wouldn't pay for it at all. That's not a thing that I need in my life. And now I kind of think it might be a thing that I need in my life.
Right.
And it's I will say it's going to be released right around the time that I will expect to hear back on my tenure application. And so if I get a successful news from my tenure application, then I might have earned a treat.
The thing is this, like, I know that this is probably the kind of thing that, they'll iterate on pretty aggressively, especially in the early stages. For me, the question I'm asking is not when, like, will I buy the version 1? The question is more like what lower entry level version of this could they possibly announce in the next couple of years that I would want because I feel like they sold this thing so hard. Like, how would I ever not want to have the higher end of this thing, even if I wait a couple of generations? That's going to be pretty interesting to see, because I don't think that this top end one is really for me, but at the same time, I kind of really want it.
We don't know. It's the top end, though. They said it's the Pro one.
And I think the other thing that we need to
one.
see, and Will, you mentioned this briefly, is we need to see what the third-party software is going to look like for this thing, because there could be the expression, the cliche expression is the killer app, and we don't know if there can be one based on the way people are allowed to develop software for it.
I mean, I'll tell you, from the demos they showed, to me, the killer app and the place that I expect to see this the most often when it comes out is when the lady puts it on an airplane. That I'm going to definitely see them on airplanes, because that's where you always see, like,
in business class.
In business class, somebody's got the new thing, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be somebody with these in business class, and people are going to be like, oh, that looks nice.
Having
That's
just
way
taken
better.
a couple of transatlantic flights recently, every single time, at least 2/3 of business class has AirPods Max. At least 2/3, and probably the rest of them just had it in their backpack.
For those long flights.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The 2-hour battery life on the first generation is a little bit of a deterrent for me to, like, really be thinking about it.
Right. But I think if you're at your desk,
did
you
you
just plug
catch
it
the
in.
marketing talk on that? They had a great line at one point where they were like, this battery pack lasts 2 hours or all day if it's plugged in.
I did catch that.
All day battery life as long as it's plugged in.
My Mac Studio also has all-day battery life if it's plugged in.
One of the best marketing things I've heard in a while.
Should we do some segments?
Let's do it.
Yep.
Okay, I'm down. Oh, gee, where's my document? By the way, I did manage to become a developer between the time I got off the call and got back on. I am developer now.
Oh, nice.
So that's your influence, Will. You're bad to have influenced me, but I think I'm going to put iOS. I'm going to do the mobile. I'm not putting this thing on my Mac, that's for sure. But I might have to experiment with the iPadOS and the watchOS beta. Do you need to have does iOS need to be on the beta to do watchOS still?
Probably. I'm not sure though. That's
all right.
That's a good question. Probably.
I'm hyper unprepared because of all my Wi-Fi issues. Someone else has to go first for album of the week.
All right, album of the week, 1,000 gecs. No, 10,000 gecs, whatever it's called.
100 gecs. I think there's only 100
gecs,
of them.
10,000
Is it?
gecs.
I think it's there's a lot of gecs.
It's what's the band is.
It's a non-zero
100
number of gecs.
The album came out in the spring. I'm just kind of too late to the party on it. 10,000 gecs. It's interesting. I feel like there's some fresh sounds there. I'm into.
Nice. All right, I found mine. The new Knower record I'm enjoying quite a lot. Knower is the Lewis Cole, Genevieve. What's her last name? They've previously been like an electronic duo, and then they'll like have these live versions of their songs where they'll get like a killer band to all just set up in the hallway of, I assume, one of their houses, and then like record these like very funky, very kind of like fusion influenced, but like super, or at least they want you to think underproduced kinds of sounds, just like really, really everything is like very dry and like kind of undermixed. There's probably some intent behind that sound, but they make it has this very like, we made this in our garage kind of feel to the videos and the sound, and they do these and you're like, oh man, these like really like rich kind of electronic soundscapes they make are also like playable. How they sort of go from like this kind of like dubsteppy kind of thing to this like funk kind of thing in their apartment is kind of interesting. Well, their new record is like they're all in on the like, upstairs hallway, recorded funk thing. It's like not a lot of synth textures, not a lot of electronic drums. It sounds like it's all basically just been performed live in the hallway of their upstairs house. And it's got like mono neon playing bass on a track or two and a bunch of collaborations. And the whole mixing is like wild. It's just like so aggressively dry. And like there's not like the EQing is like really weird at first. They're just like really going for a sound. It's like it's cool. They just can really play. So
I saw some of this on YouTube with Mono Neon, and I was deeply impressed.
Yeah, they'll like typically those will be like very different versions of their album tunes, and then that if you listen to like what's on the album, it's like kind of a dubstep-y electronic pop. But this whole new album is like that kind of more live, live performed sound. And I'm pretty sure the takes that are in the YouTube videos they've been putting up are the same takes.
Cool.
The album.
Cool.
It's only on Bandcamp, and I'll put a link to the site. I think the album is called Knower Forever.
Huh.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Very cool. How do you listen to things that are on Bandcamp? Do you bring them into your Apple Music library and listen to them on mobile on Apple Music?
I eventually will, but I've just been listening to it in the Bandcamp app because I haven't taken the time to download it yet.
Is the Bandcamp app still garbage?
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but so I am, by the way, y'all, I'm a CarPlay boy again. I got a new car a few days ago, and I have CarPlay, and the difference between Bandcamp and Apple Music on the dashboard of the CarPlay interface is like the same. So,
all right,
nice.
It's fine.
All right,
it's cool that CarPlay has this thing now where like you can see that grid of apps, but you also have this thing. It's like a widget kind of style home screen. If you like page all the way to the leftmost home screen, you get like your live next turn like Apple Maps or Google Maps little thing in a little square widget that's like live updating, and then on the same screen is like a little like play controls for the music, and then like your next turn. When I get to my house, like garage door opener controls show up on that widget screen, or sometimes my next calendar event is there, so it's kind of nice. They're doing a cool thing with it.
Very cool.
Yeah, love CarPlay.
I opted, so this is our first electric car, and I opted to not get a Tesla pretty much because of wanting CarPlay back in my life again.
What'd you get?
It's a Mach-E.
Oh, sick.
It's crazy. I did not expect to like the car part of it as much as the software part of it, because it's got all these cool things I've wanted forever. Like I don't have to carry a key in my pocket anymore. My phone is my key. It's got CarPlay. Wow. It's like automatically locks. It's just got all this like nice, current car stuff. In addition to the fact that I just plug it in to charge it and I don't do gas. But what I didn't expect to like about it is just like how it feels to drive, which it turns out like this. I think Ford I think purposefully made this thing. Like they didn't have to put the Mustang on it, but I think they did as a statement to like say, hey, this thing can perform.
Oh, it's a sports car.
Well, I think they also did it to get people buzzing about it, because there are a lot of Mustang drivers out there who do not believe that this is a Mustang.
It certainly doesn't look like a Mustang. Like that's the thing that bugs me the most about it, is that that's not what Mustangs look like.
It's very clearly like it's like a family car. It's like a Model Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got like, a bunch of seats in it. It's good storage space. But what I didn't expect is like the thing goes 0 to 60 in like 6 seconds. So, and it's extremely quiet and performant. And when you put your foot on the gas, it definitely goes. And
that's so cool, man.
It's very cool.
New cars are awesome. I just got Jen a new car that I went the other direction. I did not get an electric car. Out here, the charging networks are not great. And we just didn't. It's like I'm afraid to get one that's got the wrong charging, like for whatever the standard ends up being. So I figure this will be like the last gas car we got. We got the Mazda CX-90. It's like it's got like a fake BMW engine in it. It's like a 6-cylinder inline, very mild, very mild hybrid, but just to get the mileage to not be awful. But Yeah, it would be nice if we had like good charging networks around here, because then there'd
It's
be some more
the Wild
options.
West with this charging network thing. Like, so Apple and Google Maps, the applications will route me to chargers. So that's layer number one.
Yeah.
But then additionally, there's like this initiative from Volkswagen called
Electrify
Electrify
America.
America,
Yeah.
which is like this umbrella for like most of the charging stations are compatible with that initiative, which is to say that like pretty much if it's not a Tesla, it's on this other standardized American network. Although I can charge on a Tesla with like an adapter. So, but then there's like Electrify America. I downloaded their app, and then that's like, here's where all of our charging stations are, and like which ones are in use. Okay, cool, fine. But then inside of the Ford app is a charging network called Blue Oval, which is like, I guess it's just like select charge Electrify America charging stations, and if I use those ones and they happen to not be free ones, because some of them are free, then I guess it more conveniently charges me because I'm logged in to my credit card to do the Ford app. It's like really messy, but at the same time, I needed to park my car at the mall yesterday and charge it, and I just pulled right up to the very front spot right next to the mall, and I plugged it in, and I don't know, wasn't that hard.
That's nice. That's
Nice.
yeah, it's like we had some friends get an electric car, and we were not prepared for the adjustment quite yet to, think about charging.
My mom's had an EV for like 3 or 4 years, and she loves it. She's had a Chevy Bolt for 3 or 4 years, and it's great. I've driven it a few times. It's really fun. And that's not even
cool.
a fancy Mustang. That's
That's the kind our
just
friends have.
That's
really
what I
enjoy
want.
it.
I just want a little hot hatch EV, and Chevy's not going to make those anymore. So I'm bummed about that.
And
They're
not
like,
gonna
you
have
should
CarPlay.
drive the Equinox, and I'm like, the Equinox is a monster family car. I'm just little old me. I just want a little car, and nobody is interested in making that car anymore, I guess. But anyway, yeah, that's a cool car, Robby. I look forward to hearing more about your experience with the Mach-E.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Do you have did you do your album?
I did not. So I'll say my album is not an album. My album is a YouTube channel, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's been on my mind since going to the MOLA conference and talking to the librarian from WDR. But this is the West German radio, and just like we used to have these in the U.S. too. Radio stations used to have their own bands and orchestras and choirs and stuff. But they have a big band that's very good, and their big band has a really solid YouTube channel where they make very nice video performances of the WDR big band, and there's really fun stuff there that is pretty cool. So if you enjoy good live cuts of a really solid big band, check it out. And I don't have any particular track in mind. I can maybe dig one or two up and put them in the show notes. But the channel itself just has it's a really wide variety. They've got a lot of stuff with different guest artists. There was one that I watched recently with a guest trombone player that was really good. But anyway, if you're into contemporary big band music, you should check out the WDR Big Band YouTube channel.
All right, it's app of the week. You want to go in the same order? Will me, David?
Sure.
App of the week. Hang on. Let me think. Oh, easy. Whisky. Yeah.
Yes.
Game
And
porting
that's
toolkit.
That's whiskey without a Y. That's the
Yes.
Scotch whiskey. My app pick of the week is another thing that I mentioned earlier. I know a lot of us in this space, if we are using our iPads to read scores and parts at all, we're probably using Fourscore. I would encourage you, if you are willing to give something new a shot, or if you are not currently using an iPad score reader and you want to try one, I want to encourage you to give Newzik a shot. I've been following Newzik for 7 or 8 years now, and they have really improved the performance. They've really improved the reliability and the user interface for annotations. They don't have quite the same level of organizational features as Fourscore. They don't have all of the metadata fields and the properties panel that Fourscore so beautifully presents now in Fourscore 14. But Newzik does have this amazing, rich web syncing backend. And as we're recording this, just in the last couple of weeks, they have released a version of Newzik that you can buy outright. I don't remember what they call it. But it used to be, if you were going to be a Newzik user, because they do all of this server backend syncing stuff, it cost, I think, $25 a year to subscribe to it. But now you can pay once, and it's like $20 or $23 or something one time, and you can use a pretty significant subset of those features without paying annually. So if you are curious to try out Newzik, I would encourage you to check this out. And I'll say especially, I think the organizations that can make the best use of the cool syncing features are choirs, because everybody in a choir reads from the score. And so if somebody needs to make a cut or change something or mark a cutoff or something that everybody in the choir needs to see, they can do that in one place. And it's a really nicely done application. And I feel like it is something that gets overlooked because it's not Fourscore. And I think people should pay more attention to Newzik.
Nice. Okay, I found one. Found my little list that I keep rolling here. It's summer, and that means for some, more time to catch up on books, shows, games, the fun stuff. I'm so behind on all of the things that people have recommended to me over the past couple of years that I have been exploring a number of, I think, downtime management software is what this is called. There's two I really like. I'm using one right now called Sequel. There's another really good one called Sofa. And Sequel and Sofa, but I'll speak more to Sequel. They basically allow you to have categories of movies, TV series, games, books, podcasts. And then they have these like databases where you can search things. You know, if somebody mentions a show to you to watch, you can like search it in the app and then tell it like, hey, I'd like to eventually watch this, or I'm currently watching this, or I have watched this. You know, and it does some nice interface stuff. It shows you a nice thumbnail of all the shows and games and books that you would eventually like to read. And if you want to, you can like mark their status as whether, you know, you're currently engaging with them or not. And I think it's just a nice way to, you know, not have every single thing that is a thought or a thing I want to do be in a task app. And it's really great. You know, I've got some stuff in there right now. It's just keeping track of. It's reminded me that Final Fantasy 16 is coming out, as well as Starfield this fall. It has a little sequel, kind of tells you, like, if you've put something that's not out yet, it kind of reminds you, like, when it's going to be released, if you want to stay on top of that. So kind of a nice little way to manage some fun for the summer.
Excellent.
Well done. We did it.
We did it. I think this will be... Thank you all for covering for my Wi-Fi issues. That'll be great. I would listen to a podcast that didn't have me on it. Just smart people who I invited into a Zoom.
More often. I like it.
Totally. Especially over the summer when I've got very little else going on. I'm in.
I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for this episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in a podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review this show in the podcast app. It absolutely helps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about it. You can learn more about my music and teaching career at robbyburns.com. I'm all over the internet at Robby Burns or _Robby Burns on most social media sites. On Mastodon, I'm Robby at social.musicedtechtalk.com. Consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/musicedtechtalk. All tiers get perks, but even the base tier gets you access to the Music Ed Tech Talk Discord community, where you can chat with other supporters and guests of the show about music, apps, pedagogy, lesson ideas, tech support, and more. It's a fun place to be, and I hope to connect with you there. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Scale Exercise Play Along Tracks. Be sure to check it out. See you next time.